The extent to which we were blind to all of this cannot be overstated. We have developers who could not make their rent and are living out of their cars right now. Families who have no insurance to pay for critical life-saving treatments and other medical expenses.
And I was like, okay, what else? And he's like, we're going to be flying to Vegas. And I'm like, when are you flying to Vegas? I'm like, how old are you? And that's when he said he's 17.
Hello everyone, in this long overdue video, we are going to finally be listening to the most vulnerable party mired in all of this legal chaos surrounding the abrupt dissolution of ArcheAge Creation and Intrepid Studios. So far in my videos, we've gained a glimpse into the investor side, we've heard from the volunteer moderators, and we've of course heard from the player community that have been eagerly awaiting the next so-called World of Warcraft. Who we haven't heard from yet, and who we should really be listening to at this point, are those who actually worked for Intrepid Studios and its now elusive founder, Steven Sharif, who recently filed a counter lawsuit. Artists, writers, programmers, engineers, community managers, and so many more are integral to the production of the games we often enjoy, and in the case of ArcheAge Creation, it was no different despite the alleged fraudulent aspects of the project. As of the publication of this video, no employee have yet been compensated for PTO or paid their wages, and several lawsuits have been formed by employees due to violations of the Warren Act. What will follow are the statements and experiences shared with me by people who had interacted with Steven Sharif long before ArcheAge Creation formed, in addition to former employees who filled a wide range of positions at different points in time. Their identities have been verified and details have been corroborated that were previously unknown in the public sphere. I will of course not include things said off the record. While a couple former employees have stated they don't care if I share their identities, many more have requested anonymity. Ultimately, I've decided to make all former Intrepid employees anonymous for several reasons. First, due to ongoing lawsuits, anonymity is going to be a necessity, especially when sensitive topics are brought into the foray. Second, I feel this tension where things are going to be a little weird, where former developers associated with Intrepid Studios who had no idea what was going on about any of the allegations may be targeted because emotions are running high right now. And I think letting one or two people stick out in a sea of anonymous faces paints an even bigger target on them. Third, I don't want former staffers being affected by this video for their employment prospects in the future. As someone who's been personally threatened in the past by game development corpo that the gaming industry is small and me not staying put in my place would prevent future work, I don't want any possibility of that happening to people who are now stuck in a situation they never asked for and in an industry where being hired right now is seemingly impossible. Employee A says, one thing we haven't seen mentioned anywhere yet was that Intrepid employed a personal chef who cooked for Steven and John 3 meals a day from their home. We were told the chef would eventually come into the office and cook free lunch and breakfast every day for the team. Needless to say, that never happened. We were told it was a permit issue with the building, having to put in a commercial kitchen, but it would eventually get fixed. While I was able to independently verify the identity of the chef and also confirm that the chef does claim work at Intrepid Studios Incorporated as a full-time culinary director for over 2 years, I was unable to reach out to the chef for any comments. Employee B declined to answer most questions, but mentioned and showed a screenshot of a layoff email that all the Intrepid Studios employees received from what some have said is a mysterious sender. The email reads, "Dear team, this is a difficult message to send, and we recognize how unsettling it may be to receive. Due to the company's current financial condition, Intrepid Studios is providing this notice pursuant to the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act. This notice is being issued to all employees as a precautionary measure while the company evaluates next steps. At this time, no final decisions have been made regarding which positions may be impacted. A portion of the team may be asked to continue working as the company evaluates operational and financial alternatives. Others may be affected by a reduction in force if the company is unable to move forward in its current form. Employees who are impacted will be notified directly with additional information. With respect to compensation, payroll scheduled for February 1st, 2026 cannot be processed at this time due to the company's current financial condition. The company is reviewing its obligations and options and will share updates as soon as possible. Regarding benefits, company-sponsored health insurance coverage may be affected by changes in employment status. Information regarding benefit continuation options, including COBRA, is expected to be provided by the plan administrator early next week. That information may include important timing considerations considerations, and we encourage you to review it carefully once received. Any available options, costs, and deadlines will be outlined directly by the plan administrator. We know this communication creates uncertainty and concern, especially for you and your families. While we are limited in what we can share or commit to at this time, we wanted to communicate as promptly and transparently as possible. We'll provide additional information as decisions are made and circumstances evolve. Thank you for the work, dedication, and care you have given to the studio and to Ash as a creation. We recognize how difficult this moment is and do not take it lightly. For some additional context, the name of the sender is nihil dicit. These are words in Latin that means he says nothing. It's a common legal term as well that refers to a party that fails to respond to judicial summons. According to employee C, another email was sent out after this one from the same sender that spouted more of the typical HR assurances, and the sender elaborated that funds from Steam could have allowed the payroll to be processed had the funds suddenly not been held. Employee D says, "It was clear to me that Steven Sharif had never ran a business with employees before. He was extremely sensitive about anybody disagreeing with him publicly or even in lead developer meetings. He never seemed to be in office or available much of the time. He and his husband John would also disappear for weeks on end. An entire month could go by before anyone in the studio even heard from him. Nobody was allowed to do anything or make decisions without his blessing, under fear of termination. Steven was also very emotional. He cried when employees quit because he took it very personally. He told us he couldn't eat or sleep when employees quit." Employee E declined an interview but said, "The extent to which we were blind to all of this cannot be overstated." Employee F says, "It felt like a kid playing house. Steven was playing game dev. He had an air of arrogance as if he was a game developer, but in actuality, seemed to know nothing. He would ask and do things that made some people question him in private. Everyone would start working on one part of the game, and then resources would shift at the last moment from that one part of the game to an entirely new part. He was the boss, so everyone sort of accepted it and went with the flow. He also was the kind of person that went to extreme lengths to make sure he was liked by everybody. I would say even at that time, he fooled a lot of people. Ash's Creation Apocalypse was a bizarre decision. Everybody was confused by the new direction to a battle royale. I was certainly confused by his statements of it being a testing ground, and later some of us who had quit theorized Steven was trying to collect data for other projects, since he seemed like the kind of guy who had a finger in every honeypot." Employee G says, "It is true that payroll was missed a few times. Our payroll ran the 3rd and 17th each month. Steven did state he was trying his best to make payroll by liquidating his own crypto, and we never got our bonuses for the alpha launch. It's not true that any project leads resigned, contrary to what Steven's recent claims imply. Only a few directors resigned, which makes me very suspicious of the directors who did. As for the emails from Nihil Dikit, I don't recognize who their sender is, and I think whoever that is a creative asshole. Perhaps someone making a run to a country without an extradition treaty would send that. To me, that unknown sender is very unprofessional." Also, according to that recent counter lawsuit, Steven said he resigned around the 19th. He told us he resigned around the 28th. I believe these dates to be significant. Employee H says, "A red flag to me that hinted I needed to start looking for other employment was when the news broke about the $850,000 in unpaid SATA Systems cloud fees. I just want to let the community, the players, know something. We were passionate about Ashes. We are just as devastated and disappointed as they are. We put our heart and souls into that game and never thought at any moment it was a scam. The fallout has been severe. We have developers who could not make their rent and are living out of their cars right now. Families who have no insurance to pay for critical life-saving treatments and other medical expenses. The devs have self-organized and created a help network, how to get food, legal help, mental help, job options, and so on. I've never seen anything like this before. Right now, at this very moment, there are 136 developers in this network. Over 200 were laid off. I also want to set the record straight. These are not unqualified developers. They are not out of touch with modern game technology. They made Ashes what it is now, despite all the bullshit we were forced into doing, like constant scope changes, grandiose pot fuel ideas dreamed up by Steven, dealing with this never-ending dog and pony shows we called the live streams. We truly had some incredible talent. It's unfair for the community to be so critical of the actual workers. These are devs from Infinity Ward, Blizzard, Gearbox, Sony, and other massive AAA studios. We were very selective with our hires. Did we have average devs? Sure. So does every big studio. The truth is, if we knew from the beginning what the actual financial situation was, we could have scoped out an actual plan. We were told we had virtually unlimited resources. The Battle Royale was an epic waste of time and money and took a massive advantage of investors who were utterly clueless to game development. The reality was, Ashes was a multitude of games. It was a Navy game, a flight simulator, Battle Royale, Siege Mode game, Medieval Simulator, and more. Employee I told me I was not aware of any of the allegations. There were plenty of strange things. I knew we would need to do layoffs of our staff in December. It was strange that I never saw the directors, no formal presentations or demos. In January, Steven became almost unreachable. He was usually active on the project, and we would meet with him and the other senior staff daily. He explained he was negotiating with the board and was very busy. This carried on until the 28th of January, where he told us first he was going to resign. He explained it was his health and sketchy board mandates that he believed were illegal. As for the existence of the board, I was not personally aware of a board existing until late October or maybe November. I used to brag in interviews that we were independent with no board of directors. It was a complete surprise to me. Steven would often play Magic the Gathering with the team on Thursdays after work and would order food for 10 to 15 developers. He was friendly, fun to work with, and treated us like a family. He was not a type A personality. On a professional level, he was more difficult and would often force us to change scope estimates, would introduce wild scope changes, or dream up extremely ambitious designs that were honestly just not feasible to do unless we had unlimited time and money. To many of us, Steven was a friend. We would tease him often that we do things the Intrepid way, not the game dev way, so it made it insanely difficult to manage and ensure we hit deliverables. As for John, he was quiet. I've talked to him on multiple occasions. He is fairly religious, and you see he cares for Steven a lot. He really didn't do much at work, like nothing really. He didn't seem interested in game development. Our culture was family oriented, and we did work hard to remove toxic employees. We worked long hours, had potlucks, game nights, and would attend social meetings after work. Once the studio started to go more remote, much of this stopped. It was a very good studio to work for outside of the occasional hiccups with payroll, which I now understand was not quite that. To my knowledge, bonuses kept getting delayed for things like the alpha launch. It was enough that we pulled Steven aside to tell him we would start losing staff if we don't pay up soon. Employee J says, I, alongside others who quit, knew this day would come. At first, we would get paid on time. Slowly but surely though, payments began to come in late and then not at all. The CFO John Moore would stop responding to inquiries and emails, dodging payroll questions. I personally went a month or more without payment at least once, and some of us had to confront John Moore on when we would get paid. Steven and John acted like everything was good and would cheerfully say that the pay would come. A lot of times, especially during in-person meetings at the workplace, there was a bizarre tension in the air as many people seemingly turned a blind eye to the questionable decisions Steven would make, and they probably turned a blind eye because they were convinced by Steven he was a billionaire gamer. Employees K and L tell me, John Moore did seem to manage a lot of the financials for the company, along with stocking the office with basic supplies, snacks, and water. He seemed more like an office manager than a CFO. If there was a new expense that was needed, like software, we had to track John down and ask him to provide his credit card for it. We can confirm that there were outside accounting firms, along with an outside law firm. Steven later said John had a team of accountants working under him. Despite hiring an outside law firm, Steven would regularly ignore the advice of the attorneys, saying that the company didn't have to listen to them. Employee M states, Steven loved hanging out with people to game. They played Magic the Gathering regularly at the office, and we had poker nights in the cafeteria. Steven matched the poker prize pool once, as I recall. We had monthly potlucks organized by Margaret, and he usually attended. We even had movie watching parties for all of the employees at Sinopolis and their significant others and kids. Steven and John dressed as Santa and his elf at the holiday events and handed out gifts to the kids who attended. They loved doing stuff like that. Steven also hosted D&D nights at his home sometimes. Steven sometimes took people to Las Vegas as well. I recall one time, they all came back into the office with COVID after a long weekend in Vegas. On another note, a Mr. Tom said he was a gaming friend of Steven's he knew from some game they played together. He was hired and a job was created for him, specifically because Steven wanted to hire his friend. When Tom went remote to be with his wife in a different state, Steven moved him to the QA team, where I heard he was apparently the highest paid person in QA by almost double. Employee N tells me, I personally didn't know anything about Intrepid's financial situation or about any talks regarding funding. Looking back, there were two things that felt like warning signs to me, though this is just my opinion. The first was the launch of the paid cosmetics store. There was a reasonable explanation for it. Starting work on the shop early would allow it to be fully tested before the game officially launched. Still, I couldn't help but wonder if we were short of money and needed microtransaction sales to stay afloat. The second warning sign was a sudden push to release the game in early access on Steam. I think this surprised almost everyone on the team. Around that time was also the first time I remember hearing about a board of directors, and it seemed like the Steven Steam launch was something they wanted. My personal interpretation was that Steven, who we were told was funding Intrepid with his own money, might have been running low on funds. I thought the Steam launch could have been an attempt to show the game's sales potential, raise more capital, and buy the company some time. I don't recall specific dates, but I believe we had payroll arrive a day or two late a couple of times during 2025. There was also the matter of the Alpha 2 launch bonuses that kept getting promised and then delayed. We were told at one point to expect them before Christmas, but then as we approached that week, they were delayed again. Upon returning to work in January, we were promised they would be in the February 3rd paychecks, but we know how that turned out. I personally never heard anything about Steven liquidating crypto. Doesn't mean he didn't, but I didn't know about it. Employee O tells me, Steven was often a lot like the guy in the live streams. If livestream Steven was a 10 out of 10 positivity and energy, I'd say that day-to-day Steven was often about an 8 out of 10 of the same. He certainly had a serious side that would come out if he didn't like the way something was going, but I think he wanted Ashes to be great. As for John Moore, I never met him, so I can't say anything about him. I wasn't aware of a board of directors existing until we started on the Steam Early Access launch, and even then, we didn't really get any info other than, paraphrasing here, make sure this launches and let Steven and company worry about the money stuff. We'll give everyone more info when the time is right. Nothing specifically about the board ever came up again from what I recall until Steven's resignation message that we received on Friday, January 30th. As for the person called Nihil Dikit who sent the layoff notice via email, it's clearly not a real name. I wondered if it was an Intrepid employee who was told to send the emails and chose to use a fake name as a quiet protest. If it actually came from someone on the board, that seems like a strange decision. There may have been a few other emails from the same sender. Personally, I think the situation should have been handled differently. I would have preferred that the board or someone representing them spoke to us directly in person. Overall, I don't think it was handled well. Employee P states to me, most employees, except maybe a small group close to Steven, and I don't think Margaret was part of that group, believed Intrepid was a passion project. We thought Steven was paying for it himself because he loved ArcheAge and had enough money to make it happen. We were told many times that Intrepid was special because Steven didn't answer to investors. There was supposedly no board pushing us in other directions. The focus was simply to make the best game possible. The team fully believed this. We'd never had investor milestone reviews or flashy presentations for investors. The only people we felt accountable to were the community. If you followed Ashes of Creation's development, you know livestream demos and future roadmaps were a big part of that. At the time, I told myself those livestreams were mainly for Steven, to show what players liked, what they didn't, and to help all of us make a better game. Now, I'm not so sure. If Steven wasn't fully funding development himself and was instead raising money along the way, then those livestreams could also have been used to attract more funding. I believe Steven really does love ArcheAge and wanted to create an MMO that would excite that audience and bring in new players. I don't think Ashes of Creation started as a scam. I believe he truly intended to launch the game. I also know that the team took feedback seriously from the live streams, the PTR, bug reports, the forums, Discord, and Reddit. We had people tracking major issues every day to make sure they were seen. The team honestly believed we were building momentum toward a real launch. The game wasn't at our quality bar yet, but we had plans to get there. What happened at the end and why is still unclear to me. Why blow it all up so near to the finish line? I don't know how this will resolve or how long it may take to do so, but I do know that a lot of hardworking people were treated unfairly. I'm also really disappointed for the Ashes community. You shared this journey with us. You spent time in our world that you could have spent elsewhere. You spent money to support us when you could have spent that money elsewhere. You shared your ideas and criticisms with us to help make a better game for everyone when you could have not bothered. But you cared. You dreamt the same dream we all did. I wish we had been able to come true for all of you, and I know the rest of the development team feels the same. Employee Q shares with me, all the employees, every single one of them, are passionate gamers. Many are industry veterans and experts in their fields. None of them deserve what happened to them, and to be terminated without warning or a final paycheck, and none are responsible for this mess? We all drank the Kool-Aid and thought we were making the next big cool thing. At this point in our conversation, Employee O shows me an image. We were promised everything under the sun for our dedication and loyalty. Steven thought he could buy loyalty by promising 300% bonuses annually. He only rented it short term. This chart was shared at a town hall meeting in Intrepid where they explained how bonuses would work post-game launch. A few other people can confirm this. Employee R tells me, I was not aware of any bona fide allegations, but it was clear that things didn't add up if you opened your eyes and used your brain. We know there was a list of vendors and contractors whose payments were late or never made. Some of us saw this list ourselves, and it always felt like Steven and John were deflecting one external crisis after another. He would describe on his live streams the state of certain features in the game being far more developed than they actually were. Rather than show gameplay, he'd rant about plans and ideas. In the early days, even the Apocalypse effort claimed it was strictly a testing ground for Ashes, and the team spent something like 2 or 3 months working on it. Bullshit. Everyone there knew damn well that was closer to a year, maybe more, on development of nothing but Apocalypse, which, by the way, was a completely separate, unreal project than Ashes. He's full of shit. At work, Steven was more concerned with power versus productivity and collaboration. He has absolutely zero leadership skills, like none. He's focused on control, controlling timing, decisions, money, and carefully crafted his words, especially when live streaming. Steven relied on his charm, but I don't think he understands how transparent he is as a person. In general, he strikes me as someone who's used to dealing with unsophisticated or uneducated people. John was rarely at the studio, and when he was, I never heard him say a single word. He was probably preoccupied signing in and out of his different bank accounts. In my opinion, Intrepid was doomed from the start because Steven has control issues, controlling the narrative, decision-making, timing, and direction. He felt he knew best at all times, even though he had a room full of actual game developers. This created a culture of apathy, complacency, and uninspired busy work for many. Did many of these developers love and wanted to make a game? Yes, of course. Were there a considerable amount of developers there who thought Intrepid and Steven was a complete joke? Most definitely. Still had to smile and say, "That's great, Steven. Sounds like a plan." I was never aware of the existence of a board, but I also never believed Steven when he said he's funding the project by himself. He wasted too much time, resources, and pivoted too often for that to make any sense. Who the hell says, "Hey, you know what would be fun? How about I spend 10 years dumping my own money into a project that hasn't shipped and plays like it's been in development for 2 years?" There had to be a catch, and believe me when I tell you, every last person in that studio knew it didn't make sense. I honestly thought the entire company was a ploy to gather player data they can sell or use in his next MLM scheme or something. I don't believe he ever actually wanted to ship a game. Instead, I think one day he had an epiphany where he could use his experience from playing games to conjure up as much money as possible to make the biggest game ever. He knew all the buzzwords, laid the charm on thick, and it feels like his main objective was to keep kicking the can down the road as far as possible until one day, poof, gone. Who the hell has Alpha 1, Alpha 2, Alpha 3, Beta 1, Beta 2? The guy is just making fake milestones up as he goes. I hope the community members and the folks who put money into this project will think twice about making purchases based on promises in the future. The testimonies of the former employees make it clear that there were at bare minimum a lot of red flags, and perhaps those red flags were glossed over by the many reassurances of the head honcho Steven Sharif, who seemed to have no problem not being entirely transparent in regards to the finances of the company with those who he called his work family. It was a bit jarring to talk to former developers who were clearly not at fault for whatever is now happening with Intrepid, and it was especially hard to listen to and read all of the things happening with some of the former Intrepid workers who reached out to me about the circumstances they are now stranded in, including those who had relocated to California of all places for a job that has now vanished out of nowhere. I wanted to learn more about the psychology of the alleged bizarre decisions made by someone who has still refused to accept my repeated requests for an interview in the wake of the news we broke recently and the counter lawsuit filed, painting Steven as the victim and the valiant defender. On one hand, we have someone who seemed very transparent and passionate about the Dream MMO. On the other, we have someone who was incredibly shady, had a penchant for needing to be admired, respected, or at minimum, liked by those he surrounded himself with. A leader, if allegations from TFE Games holding lawsuit and the text messages are to be believed, who embezzled funds and committed tax fraud with a project that rallied so many under its banner. Luckily, 2 individuals reached out to me in the olden days of the MMO ArcheAge, one of whom who had interacted with Steven Sharif years and years ago. Wyford, an accountant now who used to work in private equity, and the former guildmaster of Europa Network, and his guildmate V, who was willing to corroborate on his former guildmaster's testimony about their experiences with Steven Sharif, the MMO player, before he had become an MMO maker. So he was paying real money to these people.
Supposedly. And I contacted this guy. What's the name of the guild? Blackfire Mercs?
Yeah, I believe it was Blackfire Mercs. So, like in ArcheAge, it was typical for because you did these trade runs. So, you would take trade packs and you'd be open to PvP. So it was typical to either hire for in-game money, like merc guilds to kind of protect you. That's kind of what I thought the White Order was doing, hiring with in-game money, Blackfire mercs. Later, lo and behold, Wyford kind of told us that, no, he offered this guy real money.
He's 17 years old, and he's telling me this guy's paying him. I'm like, has he paid you? And he's like, not yet. I'm like, when did he tell you this? 3 weeks ago. And I was like, okay, what else? And he's like, we're gonna be flying to Vegas. And I'm like, when are you flying to Vegas? I'm like, how old are you? And that's when he said he's 17. I'm like, he's talking down to everybody else. How about during our engagement, you kind of roll with us, pretend that we're going to fight each other, and then we'll just circle around his galleon and we'll beat the shit out of him. So Steve whispers me in game, and he's like, hey, are you free? And I'm like, yeah, what's up? And he's like, can you jump on my ventrilo? So he gives me and my first encounter, kind of like in those notes that I sent you, I shit you not, but he goes like on top of his lung. He's like, Marines, stand down! And I'm like, what the fuck? And he calls everybody on his ventrilo. And you can, if you ever get anybody from White Order, they will confirm that he refers to all his members as Marines. And he LARPs. He only wanted 2 people, but then he wouldn't let them speak. It would just be him talking. And he referenced that he wanted the best guild leaders and the best content creators on his White Order team, I guess, because he wanted to build something. I'm gonna get you $100 a week. I'm gonna fly you to Vegas. We have something big coming on, and he goes like, "Why are you working a 9 to 5 when you literally did what you just did?" I'm like, "What did I do? We just PvP. That's it." And he's like, "Yeah, man, but you got someone to turn on us." And those guys were already working for us. We were gonna pay them. One, I'm in school. I'm not working a 9 to 5. I don't know what you want from me. Like, what is it that you want out of this? And he's like, I want you to disband your guild, and I want you to come to our side and bring your best players. So I said, well, it's not gonna happen. And it's like I told you from the beginning, that it's like I'm just an ordinary person. Like I'm not into that min-maxing scene.
I remember being on our channel, and Wyford jumped into the Blackfire Mercs channel, and everyone was like, okay, what's gonna happen? And then all of a sudden, Wyford told our guild, we were like, all right, guys, attack White Order. And we, honestly, I was hesitant. I was like, okay, well, they outnumber us. And then all of a sudden, Blackfire Mercs, they turned on White Order, and we obviously won the battle and everything like that. But later on, when Wyford came back and told us that, yeah, he just offered me to leave you guys, bring the best of you, and he was going to pay me $100 a week and fly me to Vegas with all his other officers. It was, to me and a couple of the other guildies at the time, I'm thinking 11 plus years ago, so excuse my memory. But we were first speechless, and then second, we were just kind of making fun of it.
After Wyford refused Steven's offer and told him rather bluntly that Steven could improve his character in life to gain the trust of others, Steven kicked Wyford mid-sentence, then called Wyford a bundle of sticks, which would later puzzle Wyford when he found out Steven had a husband.
Anytime he saw me, he would call me a peasant, he would call me poor, he would call me a lot of shit, right? It's like, I was like, okay, dude, I don't fucking care.
Wyford and B mentioned in passing another YouTuber who may have had a similar experience to theirs called ArcheAge, who was in the guild called Orenthal, and screenshots from ArcheAge's YouTube channel say the following. Steven SoCal on May 22nd, 2014 says, "What's up, buddy? I heard you are the top player in ArcheAge. I checked out some of your videos and you seem like you know what you are doing. I'll get down to the point. I am a billionaire gamer. I don't mean to sound conceited, but it is what it is. I want to sponsor you to play for me. I'll pay you $100 a week if you join my guild as one of my officers. I'll also fly you across the world for clan LAN parties and events and vacations, 5-star resorts, private jets, all expenses paid. In addition, I'll give you bonuses based on performance and contributions in-game to my character. I come from Lineage 2. I love ArcheAge so far, and I am moving my guild of 200 hardcore PvPers here. If you are interested in this idea, I can give you some particulars in Ventrilo. Let me know. Steven." ArcheAge responds, "Hey Steven, thank you so very much for your donation and your offer. I am sorry to say that although the offer is enticing, I am going to have to turn it down. I am far too dedicated to my guild. They are like a family to me. I wish you the best, and if I could help you in any way without having to leave my guild, I would be happy to do so. Not taking no for an answer, the same day, Steven says, one last counter offer. At lunch, bring your guild into the fold. You will hold a leadership position within the clan, but answer to me as the clan leader. You will serve as my officer and yet continue to lead your people. I will pay you $200 a week and you'll come on trips, etc. We have several major achievements that we want to be first in NA and EU live servers to achieve. Mansion, Black Pearl, Castle, Nation. Consider this. You won't find it from anyone else. Smiley winky face. Neckrage again responds, it's really flattering, Steven, but I am going to have to pass on the offer. I don't do what I do for money. I do it for my family, my guild. I wish you the best of luck in all that you do. To gain a better understanding of what happened behind the scenes from another angle, I also reached out to iDream Sky, a Chinese publisher that has been marked as an important subject in text messages shared with us by Jason Caramanis, an early Ashes of Creation investor. Steven Sharif had purportedly signed a contract with iDream Sky, securing $60 million in funding over a 5-year period for a 35% revenue share, even taking pictures with iDream Sky representatives and the signing itself. That deal apparently fell through at some point, with Steven concluding that the Chinese are the absolute most dogshit culture and people I've ever experienced. iDream Sky, as of the publication of this video, has not responded back with any comments. Other investors, such as Odin in his video, who had met with John Moore and a couple others at Intrepid Studios, would also reach out to me as they were supposed to become investors into Intrepid Studios.
Hey Nef, how's it going, man? Yeah, I personally look for them. Me being a San Diego resident and part of the Chamber of Commerce in San Diego, there was a talk about this company looking for a new round of investors this upcoming May. And through one of those people that had the information, I was given the physical address of the location for the San Diego studio, which originally, and if you look on Google, was listed as a different place. So for the people that were looking for the information on Google, they would have never found the studio because it was incorrectly listed there. The information was given to me directly from this gentleman. I went to visit the location early January, where one of the Intrepid employees that was out doing a personal transaction mentioned that they were on a closed campus and that only John and Marcus were available at the time, that they were running a skeleton crew, and this was on a midday on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. A Wednesday, yeah, it was a Wednesday. So around 1-2 p.m., nobody was on the studio. Very skeletal limited crew, and this was about a week before the entire release of Steven stepping down happened. So since I've been going back, we were in talks with my private equity group to come in and invest into the company. I've invested into other projects before. So through that process, because of the way that California works, especially when you're on a group for investors, there is a 30-day cool-off period for investment trustee transfers to companies so that we can get documents signed, legal, and then our attorneys can make sure that the contracts are completely filed. And in that period, it's when the statement was made of the company closing down, Steven completely stepping down as CEO and lead director or whatever he was at the end. And so I was saved by that cool-off period. From what I was told and given in correspondence, the next round of investors was slated to come out sometime in May, and so I was looking to invest into that. And as any investor would do, I went to do my due diligence, check out the studio itself. I am a gamer, first and foremost, and my business, which you can look it up, leadersmakeleaders.org, doesn't really invest into games. This was just one of those things that I really believed in and was looking into for a project that I wanted to follow. And I said, well, before I get money into this company, let me go look at the studio, let me go find out. And that was it. I kind of left it at that. And then 2 weeks after my initial visit to Intrepid, then the release of the statement was made that the game was no longer going to be, or not the game, but that the studio was no longer going to be ran by Steven, and therefore everything was collapsing. A lot of the investment rounds and people that they brought in were all word of mouth. As I said, we have a pretty close knit circle in the San Diego business realm. Chamber of Commerce likes to disseminate information directly. So there was just a conversation that happened about potential investments into companies that were San Diego based, and Intrepid was one of those.
Jason Caramanis also put me in contact with Tim Sharif after claiming on one of my live streams that Steven Sharif had also scammed Tim, his older brother and owner of 310 Nutrition. To give some context, 310 Nutrition was discovered in the first couple of days by many disgruntled Ashes players to have listed Ashes of Creation merchandise. Many thought Tim Sharif was in on the alleged fraud by his brother Steven, and that the merchandise was moved as assets to his brother for safeguarding. However, Jason claims that Steven hoodwinked his own brother, signing a contract and getting money for the merchandise. I reached out to Tim after being connected to him for a statement, but Tim politely declined giving a statement at this time. Just like with the employees, I will not be including things said off the record with Tim. I hope this video is taken just as seriously as the first video I made that broke the dam and released the recent deluge of information. Oftentimes, not even just in the MMO space, but the entire gaming industry, serious workers' rights violations, literal slavery outside the West, and mass layoffs tend to just be glossed over in favor of extravagant breads and circuses that oftentimes do not mention where the bread and entertainers actually come from. I hope that the statements and responses from the former developers and workers of Intrepid Studios finally lays to bed the unwarranted claims without proof of how those in the trenches were involved in the serious allegations leveled against Steven Sharif or the investors. I think the first priority should be the employees who need to get what they are owed so they can continue their survival like the rest of us and also move on from this insane chapter of their careers and lives. I know a video isn't much, nor even putting them in contact with investors at this point during the legal dumpster fire that's commenced, but just like the other videos, I wanted to give people's voices a platform. And I hope you guys share this video with those in the industry and let the information speak for itself.